Michael Hunter Brody and John McMullen. Football at 4. It's the NFL schedule release day. And, John, I know that the records are already hard and fast. You have them already pre-predicted from what I see on your tweets.
Yeah. A little bit more difficult this year because there are contingencies. So you have to factor in if they go down to 12 games or 10 games. Which I hear are the two contingency plans. But, I've come up, I've run them through 16-0, 12-0, or 10-0 for everybody's favorite team.
That is, that's different, though, because I thought the two plans were 16, 14, and 12, that 10 was too low for them. I guess that changes?
Well, nobody knows for sure, but those were the two I got early. The one that makes most sense to me is 16 and 12. So then it becomes, is it 14 or 10? I don't think there's much difference between 16 and 14, so that's where I put a little more stock into 10. If you're going to be able to play 14, you can probably get 16 in. So, and then I think drop dead, like you're not going to play the season. I think the lowest they would potentially go is 10, but ultimately, I think they're going to play 16 games, so I don't think it's going to matter.
Well, that would be great. And what do you know about? I guess it was John Clayton that had mentioned that the first 4 games of the season would be non-conference games. In the event that they lost those games, they wouldn't be a big deal. Is that? I have not been checking Twitter to see if the leaks have been out there yet today. So, are we seeing that could be a possibility?
Yeah, it's looking like that is not the case, and that report was incorrect. It does make some sense if you do, as we said, if you had to go down to 12 games, for instance, you would think the league wouldn't want to eliminate division games. One of the first Eagles league was week 1. They will be at Washington. And the Redskins at FedEx Field. And then there's a number of other leagues around the league with divisional games early in the season. So from that standpoint, it looks like it was off, and there's going to be the similar tactics there usually is in the fact that you're going to have divisional games early and divisional games late, like a typical NFL season. So now, what can throw a curveball that is, I think everyone's assuming the contingencies are built in to the original 16-game template. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think that's where the change-up could be.
Now, it seems like there's going to be a 3-hour broadcast on ESPN for this schedule release. Anything you're looking for? Any ideas on how they're going to do this to fulfill those 3 hours? Because just naming out the schedule seems on paper from the outside that could be boring. Are you looking for anything for them to kind of juice it up?
No, they do it every year. I have a schedule release.
This has been a primetime special for the last couple of years now. Where you been?
I mean,
it's a different scenario now with how he just mentioned. Like, nobody really knows how this is going to play out, and there's just so much more conversation.
If any year, John, you needed 3 hours to talk about the schedule, this might be the one because you might have 3 different schedules to break down.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, if they go, to be honest, I don't know if the NFL is going to go public with all the contingencies because they want to go forward and make things as normal as possible for as long as possible. So ultimately, I think all they're going to release today is 16-game schedule, and they're not going to say if this, if that. In fact, Roger Goodell sent out the memo yesterday to all the NFL teams to instruct them not to talk about hypotheticals. I think that gives away that they are not going to be talking about hypotheticals. So I think all you're going to get today is a typical 16-game NFL schedule, and that's how they're going to move forward. But as far as the show, hey, I'm with you. I say it all the time. I mean, people are celebrating dates. They already knew the opponents. All they're getting, the only new information you're getting today is dates.
Yeah, which this year makes it even, a lot of times people like the dates, John, because they could schedule a trip, which now you don't even know that you can schedule that trip.
Yeah, and it makes it, you're right. I understood it. I always say I understand it from a logistical standpoint. If you have to travel, media people certainly are very interested because they have to book their travel, but also people, fans who say they want to go to Lambeau Field. That's one of the leaks out. It's going to be December 6th. The Eagles are at Lambeau Field, so they can, schedule that trip. But you're right, this year's different. I mean, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to be let into the stadium. So from that standpoint, it should be less interesting than ever before because the vacations, the trips are kind of off the table, I would think. I don't think anyone's going to be booking any travel anytime soon. And if they are, prepare to be disappointed. So, yeah, I mean, but it is what it is. I mean, I don't understand why people get excited about the NFL schedule in a typical year, but people love it.
I think it's more that first sign of, like, here's the games, this is where they are, the travel aspect of it, all that, hey, where are you going this year? You know where the road games are, but it's like, hey, if I want to go to a game and it's warm weather and they're going to play in Miami in December, those are the kind of things that I would particularly look for if I was a ticket holder or somebody who went to games. But, obviously that is a live event that will probably draw well tonight. After tonight's schedule release, what is really next in the NFL in terms of what can be done? I know the facility thing. Is that what's the latest on those opening and what can be done there?
Well, the NFL sent out a memo last night to all the teams. They want plans in place by May 15th to get the facilities open. So that is the next step, and that's going to be interesting. It's going to be a phased rollout of facilities being opened. At first, it's going to be 50 to 75 employees, player employees. So think coaching staff, personnel staff, training staff, people like that, going to be allowed first into these facilities around the country. And then I think the biggest hurdle the NFL's got to deal with is, and this is the reason they canceled the international games I talked about, having to deal with different governments, you're talking about different countries' governments and how they handle things. That's just untenable at this point. And then you have to come back to the states and realize there are certain facilities in certain states that are going to be able to open quicker, more quickly than, say, the Jets and the Giants and even the Eagles and Detroit and teams like that in certain hot spots, so to speak. And then you start talking about competitive advantage. You can't let players into, say, Minnesota and Green Bay in the Midwest and not let them into New York and Philadelphia. There's a competitive advantage part to it there. So they didn't really address it in the memo, but they've been pretty consistent, the league, that says they're not going to open up facilities to players until all 32 can be opened up to players. So that's going to be the biggest hurdle. And I still don't think that's going to happen, best case scenario, till training camp. And that would be the best case scenario.
Yeah, that's typically like late July. You're talking about mid-July, late July. You're talking about getting live training camp going on. And then, the first real test, I guess, will be, John, when that first week of August comes around and the Hall of Fame game is set to go, whether or not that Thursday night we will have a kickoff and we will have people in those stands at all. I mean, I guess at this point, thinking about people in the stands in August, when you're hearing what's going on with baseball, like, yeah, you're going to play home stadiums, but nobody in there, it would be pretty far-fetched to think that game in Canton's going to have people in it.
Yeah, I agree. Miami put out a plan to where they would scale back to have maybe 15,000 people in the stands, and someone argued the Dolphins don't hit that number late in the season anyway. That, I think, is sort of what's going to happen. I think that's the NFL's plan. They want some fans there, but you're going to have to deal with these social distancing measures, and I don't think governments are going to approve 70,000 people in a stadium. So I think it's going to be this weird amalgamation of 10, 15,000 people in these big stadiums, almost like an XFL game. I don't know. And obviously they're going to be spread out. So even different from that standpoint. I don't know. I think it's going to be a mess. And then you got to talk about, what 15,000 fans are you going to let in? I don't think it's going to end well.
Not only, and not that people care about us, but which media members, if any, are going to be allowed. I'm sure they got to let some in, but are they going to get handpicked?
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Especially with a team like the right. Eagles, who have 400 media members.
I know. I mean, there's going to be, I would imagine, a cutoff point, and there's going to be some unhappy people. But there's not much you can do about it, and people tend not to care about us anyway, so I don't think they're going to care.
Don't say that. Would you say, though, that with these limited amount of people in the building, would the tickets be more money because people are fighting for those limited tickets, or would it be less money because nobody wants to go to these games?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I
think you got at least 15. I think, John, you got at least 15,000 people who don't care.
I easily you could get those people in the building. I don't think that's the problem. But from the NFL's perspective, yes, from a secondary market standpoint, I think the value would be greater, but it would be such a public relations hit to the NFL if they tried to price gouge on top of limiting fans. I don't think the league could do it, but I do think the secondary market, I think people will price gouge. I don't think there's any question. I mean, you see, turn on the news today and you'll hear about people scandals and people trying to take advantage of other people because of situations like this.
By the way, as John mentioned, if the reports are true, the Eagles will open at the Redskins. Just to refresh my memory, they played at Washington last year as well, and against Washington in 2017, the Super Bowl year as well, correct?
Last year was late in the season, week 16. That was
they opened
they played at home. They played at home for week 1 last year
in Philly because they played Washington the opening game this year. Okay, so they played home against Washington.
They played Washington, I think at Washington on the Super Bowl season. Yeah, last year was at home here. Yes.
Yeah. Now I've also seen a report, and I don't know that this is 100% accurate, but it is coming from the Minnesota Star Tribune, that the Saints will host the Vikings on a Friday Christmas Day game.
Yeah, Christmas.
So the NFL is trying to go mono. This is like the Monday Night Wars here, John. You got the NFL against the NBA on Christmas Day.
That was interesting.
And by the way, Christmas Day for the NBA could be opening day this year.
Yes. And that one caught me by surprise. I think that's the most interesting part of the schedule because you do have to wonder what are they exactly trying to accomplish. Obviously, that would be late in a typical season, Christmas. So if we get there, and at that point you start to have Saturday games after college. But it's interesting. I mean, the NBA is, Christmas has always been their day. And if there's an NFL game, never mind, that's a pretty high-profile NFL game as well, which two teams have projected to be at least certainly playoff-worthy. I mean, that's a salvo, let's say that, because the NFL is obviously going to beat the NBA in ratings.
Yeah, and that's what, a lot of times they don't play on Saturdays of college and Fridays because of high school, but high school football is done. And there was a report that I had seen that suggested that if there were no high school and no college, and specifically no college games, that the NFL would look to jump in on that Saturday and schedule more Saturday games throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, and I think that was early. There's been 1,000 things thrown against the wall because everything changes by the minute, practically. I'm not being facetious there. I mean, things change every day. And all of these things have been sort of asked. And at one point, there was a concern that, I mentioned the Jets and Giants again. Well, yeah, if you can't play at MetLife Stadium because of all the issues there, and you have to go to neutral sites and maybe in the middle of the country somewhere in less populated areas, then you need dates, and you have to figure out if you have multiple games at the same stadium, similar to the things baseball would have to go through just in finding venues if they want to play in Arizona or Florida or one central location. So you got to be more open to different dates, and they're not playing college. Obviously, Saturday would be into it. But I don't think, as I said, I don't think you're going to see anything like that today. You're going to see a 16-game NFL schedule, and they're going to pretend like all is well. But there are contingency plans.
John McMullen, Football at 4 at JF McMullen. Couple quickies. We were talking before you jumped on about the Eagles linebacker situation and a couple names that are, Mark Barron is an interesting guy because he kind of fits the Eagles mold, right, John? He's a college safety who's a bigger safety, played NFL linebacker, has had some injury issues, but he was pretty productive last year with the Steelers. So would he be one of those Chris Long, LeGarrette Blount type third wave of free agent signings that the Eagles could be intrigued by?
Well, you would think. I mean, I've talked about linebacker a lot, and I don't know how the Eagles could be comfortable with that position. Now, they did draft 2 players, but Davion Taylor's a third-round pick, very, very raw prospect. Sean Bradley's from Temple, obviously. South Jersey kid is a 6th-round pick, so it's not like you can expect those guys to step in and play. And then you're talking about who are the starters going to be. And, in today's NFL, you're only talking about 2 guys, 2 3-down linebackers, and those project to be Nate Gary and TJ Edwards. And, hey, the Eagles insist that they like those guys, and they think TJ's ready for an increased role. They think a lot of Nate Gary, especially as a coverage player, especially as a modern linebacker, sort of what you just described with Mark Barron. So, and then they signed Jatavis Brown as well. So they've had this get more speed on the field mentality that's just not at wide receiver. It was also a linebacker because Taylor and Bradley and Brown can all run, and you can see the type of linebacker they want. I think they're happy. I don't know why, but I think they're happy with the linebacker position.
Another name that we were talking about was Trevor Williams, the cornerback. Where do you think he's at in terms of playing on the opposite side of Darius Slay? Is Sidney Jones ahead of him right now? Like, where do you think that he stands on the outside?
The first thing, John, was I had no clue that the Eagles even had signed him. He kind of snuck in there. Yeah. They signed him back in January during the playoffs as one of those futures things, but he actually could play. He was a pretty good player in San Diego.
Yeah, I think when he did sign a deal, people looked at him and said, maybe this is somebody who can show up in the offseason when there was going to be an offseason, do some things, maybe open some eyes. I think that's kind of dimmed now that Darius is here. And clearly the Eagles' plan is Avonte Maddox is going to be the starter outside opposite Darius Slay, and Sidney Jones is going to push him. And then I think when you look at somebody like Trevor, I think a lot of his future is tied into, can they move Rasul Douglas? If they're able to move Rasul Douglas at some point, that opens up a spot at corner. And then I think, you have a legitimate competition, and somebody like Trevor would be in that conversation. Until that happens, though, there's just not enough roster spots unless somebody gets hurt. You're talking about Slay, Maddox, Jones, Douglas on the outside. You're talking about Roby Coleman and Cravon LeBlanc in the slot. There's 6 corners right there. It's going to be really difficult for them unless they are able to move Rasul Douglas.
Yeah, it was interesting when we brought him because somebody had written a piece about a guy to watch out for when training camp comes around. He said, Trevor Williams, when the hell did they sign him? But sure enough, I looked it up, and they did sign Trevor Williams back in January. Futures deal. Pretty good player. Had 2 injury years the last couple of years, so he's had some rough time with the injuries. But when he was healthy, he was a pretty good player for the then San Diego. I think they played in San Diego when he was there in 2016, 2017. Follow John at JF McMullen. Make sure you check out his stuff at Sports Illustrated as well. And Football at 4 every day right here on the Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, take care, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.
John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.